You're welcome along. Tuesday evenings off the ball. Joe Molloy with you. We are going to talk to Katie Mullen this evening, the Irish hockey captain, who is also playing in an All-Ireland Camogie final this Saturday. We will speak to Eric Donovan as well after his weekend in Glasgow, beaten against the very impressive Robisi Ramirez, a third-round stoppage. We'll also chat about the roving goalkeeper in Gaelic football, Rory Beggan, Niall Morgan, you name it, Jason Sherlock and Malachy Clerkin on the way after 8 o'clock. And on the football show, amongst other things, we'll chat to Adam Pope from BBC Leeds about Marcelo Bielsa, the most popular manager ever, I think, to be sacked in the history of football with the fans. We will also hear from Jack Byrne after a stellar performance for Shamrock Rovers last night. I think it's fair to say League of Ireland is better with Jack Byrne in it. Richie McCormack, good evening, hello.
Hey, Joe.
Even you would admit the league is better with Jack Byrne in it. Even you.
Yeah, it's. I mentioned this with Enda, before the season started.
Ooh, Wi-Fi gremlins.
Yeah.
Your bohemian spirit wouldn't let you say the next sentence. We will get you back on a better line in just 1 second. Ronan Mullen here in studio. Hello.
Hi, Joe.
So we're talking to Eric Donovan around 7:30 or so. He was in Glasgow at the weekend. The chief supporting act to the main event there, and he was against Robisi Ramirez. It was a third round stoppage. Robisi Ramirez, 28 years of age, a two-time Olympic champion and a very, very hot prospect as he is beginning his move into the professional ranks. And it was a difficult night for Eric Donovan, third round stoppage.
Yeah, like Ramirez almost has like a false presence in professional boxing at the moment, given he had that mishap early in his professional career off the back of that stellar amateur success that you're alluding to.
Lost his first fight in the pros.
Yeah, and like was able to address that in the subsequently against the same opponent, but that kind of sets you off kilter a little bit. Typically, you know, a nice seamless progression up the ranks and a world title shot in your first 10 fights or so. Hasn't quite panned out like that, but he seems to have settled quite nicely into the pro ranks now. And you know, for Eric, it was a fight he had to take given the stature of it. As you alluded to, you know, chief support on a huge showcase event on Sky Sports. And it looked like a difficult task on paper and proved to be an even more difficult task in reality, because I think as much of a skillster or slickster as Eric is, Ramirez is one of the greatest amateurs of this century, certainly, and it was evidenced on Saturday night. Yeah,
so we'll chat to Eric 7:30. I'm sure lots of you watched the fight. It was on Sky Showcase. Formerly Sky One, now Sky Showcase. I'm still getting used to that, so I'm sure lots of you caught the fight.
Rebrand for rebrand's sake, Joe, I would say.
Indeed.
Everybody knew what Sky One was.
So we're going to chat with Malachy Clerkin and Jason Sherlock as well, the roving goalkeeper, Rory Beggan, Niall Morgan, etc. The precursor, of course, Shane Curran. Let's not forget his place in history here.
Of course.
And so Beggan was caught out on Sunday against Kerry, although really it was a terrible pass to him. It was a flat pass, a square pass, no pace on it. And Sean O'Shea pounced. Kerry went up the field. Devin Clifford scored into an empty goal. And lots of GAA fans, I suspect, and former players sat there with their arms crossed and said, it's been coming. It's been coming. So where Sherlock is on this will be interesting, given that he's, you know, one of the foremost thinkers, you would think, around, and very recently involved with Dublin. And then Malachy Clerkin will be on as well, who's seen it all and been watching quite a few of the games, and obviously is a Monaghan man as well. So I'm sure he's had that emotional sense of watching Rory Beggan come out the field, heart in his mouth.
From a point where we can generously say Gaelic football didn't evolve all that much in the 20th century, Joe. Come to the 21st century, there's actually been huge strides forward, even specifically in the realm of goalkeeping, from, you know, the kick-out strategies, more and more goalkeepers taking free kicks, and then latterly this constant sort of risk reward of, you know, involving themselves for continuous play in an outfield setting. And
gallivanting is the technical term.
That's the technical term indeed.
Yeah.
But like, you've got the likes of Rory Beggan is well equipped for it. Niall Morgan similarly. But you wonder, is this going to be a trend that's adopted in the same way that in soccer, you know, split centre backs from kickouts with teams that aren't necessarily equipped to carry it out? And, you know, when you've got the calibre of a goalkeeper of those mentioned, I think it's perfectly fine. And I was at the Armagh Monaghan game the weekend before last, and it was actually a crucial element of Monaghan's game plan to stay in that game, where Rory Beggan, at a time when Monaghan were down to 13 men, was sort of fundamental in keeping possession for the latter period of that game.
That's an extreme example, though.
No, but like
13 men, I get that.
Yeah, but even my natural inclination was, when the black card happened for Monaghan, he's going to have to go back and goal now.
Yeah.
But if anything, they doubled down. But I think, as we were discussing earlier, the high watermark for it was the Ulster final last year, where at times Morgan and Beggan were going head to head in midfield.
Yeah, I did wonder about it. Even that day, there were times where Niall Morgan was going forward and Peter Hart was covering him in the goal, and I was thinking, I mean, look, you're doing okay and everything, Niall Morgan, but I think Peter Hart will be better in possession in the opposition half than you, and that's where you wonder if it's just innovation for innovation's sake. And the element of surprise is long gone as well now. I mean, that was one of the great weapons, is that no one's expecting this. Here I come, and it's an overlap, or it's, you know, a touch of chaos for the opposition to deal with. Whereas now, if you're playing Monaghan, if you're playing Tyrone, you're planning for this and maybe setting traps for this. And I don't know. I think for me, jury is still very much out. You wouldn't want to discourage innovation. Like, for starters, not just booting the ball long from a kick out and trying to keep possession. That is a no-brainer. I think as well, getting involved in the build-up play around your own goals to provide an extra man, absolutely 100%. And I think even, you know, 20, 30 metres from goal, if you can arrive and inject a bit of pace and provide an overlap, provide an extra man to almost break a press, I think that's okay too. But like a Beggan standing on the halfway line when Monaghan are going nowhere, I'm not sure about that. I don't know what that's adding. I don't know what the benefit there is to make the risk worth it.
And one of the highlights of the championship last season was Beggan racing back to dispossess Matty Donnelly, putting himself in a position which they probably shouldn't have been in the first place, where he had to do that. And, you know, it's like live by the sword, die by the sword. There are instances where it pays off, and the extreme example was Ethan Rafferty, who came through Armagh underage ranks as a precocious attacker and now has been donning the 16 jersey on the programme for the last 2 seasons. Never got a run out in meaningful action necessarily, but sprung from the start against Mayo at the weekend, and one of the few highlights that was shown on TV at the weekend, made a really telling contribution where he burst through midfield and laid on Aidan Nugent, which looked like a crucial score at that time in the game. And that very much was the element of surprise, because Blaine Hughes, who had, you know, nailed down that number 1 spot, Mayo number 1 weren't expecting him to be dropped necessarily, and also for Rafferty to basically spend much of that game outfield would have caught them on the hop. But they're going to be like for the championship, people are going to be ready for that now.
When Mayo came up against Monaghan in the league this year, they did have a bit of a plan for Beggan. I mean, they marked him at times and took him out of the game. So, I mean, they had been talking about it. The one I don't understand as well, and it was on show in Tralee, where Dublin had Evan Comerford pushed right up for Kerry kickouts, almost to say, there's no space in this part of the field, I'm here. And he was on his own, he wasn't marking anyone, he was almost just blocking off, say, just short of halfway this section of the pitch. And I was thinking, I mean, bomb it on him. Bombs away. There's no good outcome there for Evan Comerford, I don't think, if you have a David Moran or Nathan O'Shea sprinting to that portion of the pitch and ball kick there. Either, realistically, the most likely thing is O'Shea or Moran are going to win it over him, and then does Comerford tackle them? Does he start sprinting back towards his goal? Well, like, why? That's bad. I mean, it's just bad all round, panic all round there. Or say Comerford manages to rise above Aidan O'Shea or David Moran and come down with the ball. Would you back him not to foul the ball? Would you back him to give away possession cleanly? Like, I don't know. I mean, that one I just can't work out. I understand it's a deterrent, as in there's no space here. Yeah. Actually, for me, as an opposition goalkeeper, I would think this is better than no space. Not only is there, in reality, there is space because you're not the size of my bigger men, but now your goalkeeper's out of the goal and 30, 40, 50 metres from goal. I mean, all hell's going to break loose. So that one, I can't understand that one.
Yeah, in the Armagh Dublin game, which at the time felt like an outlier, has now established a trend of Dublin performances, but Dublin fell way behind in that game in the second half, put the squeeze on Armagh's kickouts, and Armagh were doing that bunch and break where, you know, huddle the players in the middle and split either side, and basically Comerford from the start of the second half was standing in that space that you're talking about. So from that point of view, it's a need-must situation. Let's get as many people to press these kickouts as we can, and Dublin actually almost found a route back into the game by dint of that. But like when Cluxton pushed up in that drawn All-Ireland final, that was circumstance. But to do it against Kerry and to make it like a go-to game plan doesn't make any sense, because I do think they will come undone eventually, because it's not an overly sophisticated game plan to spot one of the, like, someone who's not equipped to be playing outfield for long spells and against like one of the most competitive like aerial parts of the field, that middle third. So I don't know, I think there is strands of it that are innovation for innovation's sake, and yet like it's been borne out in the last decade or so from Stephen Tuxton on that the goalkeepers have become arguably the most central figures in the game, you know. Yeah,
for sure. Bielsa more popular than Bobby Robson when he was sacked from Newcastle? I doubt that, says one texter. He's a good example, Robson. Yeah, for sure. Fernandinho handed the captain's armband to Zinchenko, says D in Dublin 1. What a beautiful gesture. Who says millionaire players in an ego-filled game aren't capable of enormous acts of empathy? I mean, look, it was a nice thing to do. I don't think giving it to Zinchenko was literally in tears before the game for very obvious reasons. I don't think, like, was it an enormous act of empathy? I mean, do we have such a low base for our Premier League footballers that just an acknowledgement that your country's at war and your family may be stuck there and something to kind of say, we're thinking of you? I don't know if that's an enormous act of empathy. It was a nice thing to do and everything, but I wouldn't go crazy about it. Maybe that's just me being cynical, I don't know.
No, but like the symbolism is what it is, and you don't want to put a huge amount of stock in it, but at the same time, you know, there are presumably Ukrainians who draw some comfort from that kind of thing.
Oh, it was a nice thing to do. I'm not falling over it though.
No, but I was more going to allude to the scenes before that Everton City game, which, you know, the circumstances around Man City's affiliations behind the scenes and laterally Everton's, which we'll probably come to in the news round here, that, you know, to see Zinchenko in tears, you know, like this was a touching moment.
It was 100%, yeah.
And in the grand scheme, like, it's all relative, obviously. You know, like, sport can only serve that symbolism to a certain degree, but I think the texter probably is a smaller example of that.
So the news round is brought to you by Gillette. Put your best face forward with our new and improved razors. Richie, we are hoping you're there and ready to take off with news of Usmanov and Everton.
Yeah, growing calls for Everton to cut their ties with sponsor Alisher Usmanov. The Uzbek-born billionaire has had his assets frozen by the EU following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and his close ties to Vladimir Putin. Usmanov's holding company, USM, has naming rights to Everton's training ground Finch Farm, and a company he owns, Megaphone, is Everton's shirt sleeve sponsor and the primary sponsor of the women's team. The former Arsenal shareholder also paid €36 million recently for the option of naming rights to Everton's soon-to-be-built Bramley Murdoch Stadium. Usmanov says he'll pursue all legal means to protect his reputation, but UK Labour MP Chris Bryant told Parliament today that measures against Usmanov and indeed Roman Abramovich are long overdue.
Alisher Usmanov has already been sanctioned by the EU, but not yet by the UK. But I suspect he'll be pretty soon on a UK list. And Everton should certainly be cutting ties with him already. Roman Abramovich, well, I think he's terrified of being sanctioned, which is why he's already going to sell his home tomorrow and sell another flat as well. And my anxiety is that we're taking too long about these things. Now, I'd have a suggestion on what might help. I fear that the government is frightened of letters, lawyers' letters from all these oligarchs' friends. One way to circumvent that is if ministers just read into the record in a proceeding in Parliament all the sanction criteria, and then they'd be protected.
He's been very strong in this, it must be said. So the EU today froze the assets of 6 or 7 oligarchs, certainly. Now, we know Liz Truss said at the weekend there is a UK hit list. She was citing legal complications with trying to implement those sanctions, but there's definitely a sense that they're coming. Thomas Tuchel, meanwhile, Richie, interesting exchange at his press conference.
Yeah, he snapped at reporters following repeated questions regarding Roman Abramovich's Chelsea ownership. Ahead of tomorrow's FA Cup trip to Luton, Tuchel faced 4 questions related to Abramovich and the invasion of Ukraine. But by the 5th, he'd had enough.
No, listen, you have to stop. I'm not a politician. You have to stop, honestly. I can only repeat it. And I even feel bad to repeat it because I never experienced war. So even to talk about it, I feel bad because I'm very privileged. I sit here in peace and I do the best I can, but you have to stop asking me these questions. I have no answers for you.
I don't really know what the questions were that he was asked, but I do have sympathy for him in his position. He always struck me as a decent man, intelligent man, and what can he say? I mean, sure, he can come out and destroy Putin or destroy the war. I don't know. What was he asked, Richie? Did you get to see the full press conference?
Yeah, it's along the lines of, is the questions over the ownership of Roman Abramovich a distraction in the lead up to, the remainder of Chelsea's season, starting with that trip to Kenilworth Road tomorrow night? Are you concerned about where Chelsea are going in light of what may or may not happen to Abramovich, etc., etc.? So it was along those lines. It was looking to get the footballing perspective from Tuchel, and also obviously asking a bit about the invasion itself. So you can understand, why at question number 5, when he's tried to put out as many platitudes and straight bats as he can, that he might lose the rag. It kind of shows the difference in setups for European clubs and English ones, because a few people have pointed out that the likes of Bayern Munich, say, would have Hasan Salihamidzic, their sporting director, out front for these kinds of matters. And these kinds of matters will be put to, like, the sporting director, will be put to a director of football, not the person who's tasked with the day-to-day running of the starting squad of 22 or whatever it is. So Chelsea, especially in this instance, should have somebody out front dealing with these questions, because it's not going away from their point of view. Whatever about, Jurgen Klopp or Jesse Marsh or whoever else being asked about the invasion, Chelsea are going to be asked about this repeatedly. And there's now talk, obviously, of prospective bidders coming in with Abramovich, as you heard there from Chris Bryant, considering at least diving out of the UK. So it would behoove them to have somebody ready to answer these questions, to basically soak up the first 10 minutes of a press conference and let Tuchel get on with, what he has to get on with.
I mean, I also sense, if they were the nature of the questions, I would sense someone as intelligent as Tuchel realises how ridiculous it would be to be talking about how the war is a distraction to his footballing preparation, and he doesn't want to go down.
Not necessarily the war, but like the Abramovich ownership and his passing off of the stewardship to
but by extension, like this war has caused an issue for Abramovich, and therefore it's affecting my players. I think Tuchel sees how that would appear, and so it's in a no-win. He's in a no-win situation, I think, at the moment. There's no update on the Abramovich peace talks we've been hearing so much about, I presume.
No. That seems to have been a bit of a red herring, according to reports from yesterday evening, at least, anyway. So,
okay.
Not that we should give it any credence to begin with.
No. So, World Athletics then have followed suit.
Yeah, World Athletics announcing today that Russian and Belarusian athletes have been banned from all upcoming events. It means neither country will be represented at this month's World Indoor Championships in Belgrade, nor the Summer's World Championships in Oregon. Russian athletes have been able to compete as neutrals, of course, due to their federation's ban by World Athletics since 2015, but that loophole has also been closed. Swimming's governing body FINA says that Russian and Belarusians will only be able to compete as neutrals. They've also withdrawn the FINA Order Award bestowed upon Vladimir Putin back in 2014, while basketball chiefs FIBA say that all Russian teams and officials are no longer allowed to compete in FIBA basketball and 3x3 basketball competitions worldwide.
Okay. Now, we do have football this evening. We mentioned Usmanov and Everton. They are playing.
Yeah, and the bad news could continue for them tonight. Everton could find themselves in the relegation zone of the Premier League tonight. That's if Burnley win at home to Leicester. That'll see Frank Lampard's side fall into the bottom 3. Meanwhile, Everton have received an apology from the Premier League referees chief Mike Riley after they were denied a penalty by VAR against Manchester City at the weekend. Rodri looked to have handled the ball in his own penalty area, but the Premier League later claimed that there was insufficient evidence of handball in that particular instance. But Riley has apologised to the owners and indeed to Lampard.
Okay. He didn't phone up Frank, or do we know?
I think he did, yeah. I think there was personal phone calls involving... Lampard was definitely one, and Farhad Mashiri I think might have been another. Okay. But they wanted to show contrition for this. Not that it's much use to Everton, like, who are probably going to be in the relegation zone tonight if Burnley pick up 3 points.
It was an odd decision, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's just a deferral of responsibility, I think, that VAR has brought in. It's one of the upshots of it, which we've enough of a body of proof now to look at that. There's so many instances, like the handball in the FA Cup tie between Middlesbrough and Manchester United, which again, the lad nearly caught the ball. And it's the referee didn't act because he probably thinks subconsciously or otherwise that VAR will bail me out here. But in that instance, VAR couldn't rule on a handball that didn't directly lead to a goal. So Watmore took the ball down with his arm and then squared it, so he wasn't in the act of scoring. So VAR couldn't intervene. But again, that was a blatant handball. This one, the referee on field just froze because it was clear as day. Everybody appealed for it. Do you know, some of those you need a second look at, and I don't know, insufficient evidence. Like there wasn't even a suggestion that it was the shoulder or like chest. It was clearly he struck his arm, and these are that's a massive point loss for Everton, and there was enough time in the game to wholly change the result or maybe turn it around and win the game. So, it's all well and good, as Richie says, making an apology, but points on the board would be a lot more valuable.
It was such a bad decision that people were raising the spectre of corruption as the only explanation for such a bad decision. Should hasten to add, no corruption at play here, but that was the only explanation people could find some kind of logic in.
Yeah, I don't know if the long game will be a rugby-esque, like an audible conversation between...
Why haven't they done that? Because it's such a no-brainer.
Apparently I just infer from what the commentators say that they're basically listening to it as it's happening. So whoever the co-com is in this instance, was it Gary Neville, basically saying they're not going to give it kind of thing.
That also bugs me.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
The co-com is like, they're going to give it because they're hearing the conversation, and then 30 seconds later referee blows his whistle. I mean, I now want the co-coms to just repeat verbatim what's being said.
And what struck me about this situation was that he wasn't asked to come and look at the screen, because for a pivotal decision, but also one that you would think would only need a glance to confirm that the VAR took it out of his hands on that occasion. But like the notion that the introduction of video referrals would take the debate out of football has been well and truly quashed, because if anything, it's just heightened. When a decision isn't given a team's way, it's just amplified severalfold.
CJ's texted in on Tuchel. I understand his frustration, but this is much bigger than him. The club he works for is owned by a man in the circle of confidence of a dictator. He needs to pick a side, and to be honest, that should mean walking. Today, there's no grey area. He's either working for someone who is verified as being an ally of Putin, or he isn't. Which is a fair way of putting it as well, I suppose. I mean, that might be a question someone may ask of Tuchel. I presume, Rich, in that press conference, nobody said to him, for instance, are you considering your position given events?
No, do you know what? I can get the actual questions up here, because I do have, a transcription of it, but it was all fairly, in the main anyway.
How's it affecting preparation? Are you concerned?
Yeah, how's it affecting preparation? Are you concerned? Like, Ruby down here. Okay, serious matters going on in the world right now, and certainly around Roman Abramovich's control of Chelsea. He's passed on control to trustees. Can I ask for your thoughts on that? Was one question. Is Roman Abramovich's ownership a problem in the current international situation? Was the next one. How much of a distraction is everything that's going on, and how do you lift the team after Sunday? That was number 3. And then on to number 4 was, how worried are you about the future running of the club, and what would your message be to fans at the moment? And then question number 5 was the one we heard attempted, and then Tuchel shot back. So like I say, it wasn't exactly, are you considering walking, given the fact that your boss is linked to Vladimir Putin? It was, you all right? Everything getting on okay? Team are all right?
And arguably that last question is maybe the fairest one to ask, and the most reasonable one to ask. Like asking how it's affecting preparation and are you worried and all this kind of stuff that's tricky terrain, I think he feels, when you're comparing it to what's going on in Ukraine. But maybe considering his position might be one he does get asked over the next while. I don't know. It's hard. I mean, this is very tricky terrain as well. So where are we going next?
FA Cup action as well tonight. After knocking out Manchester United in the last round, Middlesbrough welcome Tottenham to the Riverside tonight in the 5th round of the FA Cup. There's no Aaron Connolly for Borough tonight. The Republic of Ireland striker apparently has a minor injury concern. Premier League leaders Manchester City are away to the Championship's bottom club Peterborough. Recent Ireland call-up Sam Schmodix starts for the Posh. And 18-year-old Republic of Ireland underage international Teo Adaramola starts at left back for Crystal Palace tonight. They're at home to Stoke, for whom former Ireland underage international Jack Bonham starts in goal. But a hell of a debut for Adaramola, the 18-year-old for Palace.
It would certainly be a powerful gesture if Tuchel were to do it, Richie. Do you think he should?
You see, the ceding of stewardship by Abramovich has bought them so much wiggle room. But then again, you have to look at who his appointees are to the Chelsea board and the people that remain, like Marina Gravenskaya and Bruce Buck, would certainly be acolytes of Abramovich, and they would clearly still be under the influence of Abramovich, even if he's saying publicly he's stepping back. There would need to be vast sweeping change for it to be fully clean of the stench of what's gone on there for the past 19 years now at this stage. I don't think he will walk. I don't think managers in a position like that will walk. Like the instance we've seen today is the Lokomotiv Moscow manager, pardon me. He's walking away, and that's fair enough. But then you have, on the other side of things, kind of calls from Vitaly Mikalenko, the Everton fullback, the guy who we saw in the embrace with Zinchenko on Saturday. He put up on Instagram calling out Russia's squad, saying that they've been incredibly silent during all this. He name-checked the Russia captain Artem Zubov by name and basically called them all sorts, saying that they need to speak out against this and that they will pay for their silence, etc., etc. So it's a very emotive subject for Ukrainians posted around the world. But I don't think a link like your chairman or like Frank Lampard, who apparently Usmanov had to deny that he was actually involved in the interview process to appoint Lampard, even though he was on the call, but apparently was on the call for a separate matter related to the major shareholder Farhad Mashiri. Like they're not; these managers aren't going to walk. There's massive contracts behind them, but there are moral questions certainly to be asked about them and their continued involvement if it's going to be close with the likes of Usmanov, with the likes of Abramovich and others.
We are out of time. Ronan Mullen, thank you.
Cheers, Joe.
Richie, thanks very much.
Nice one.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
Now, after 9 winners in a row, we had a rollover on the cash machine today, which means there's more to be won tomorrow. The new figure tomorrow is €22,342.17. To enter, simply remember that amount. Text the word play to 57599. That's 57599. Get your entry.